Prime Minister, thank you. This, as Mike pointed out, this could not have happened without you, and we're very grateful.
Thank you.
We will take a look perhaps at China and America first, but then we'll come back to the idea of Singapore as a role model. And just so people know, we will have questions from the audience at the end. As you've already heard quite a lot of at the beginning of this dinner, a great inevitable theme of this meeting has been the issue of China and America, and especially the idea of the current tension. You are friends of both, but you're also in the middle, which is sometimes an awkward place. And I wondered, how much do you think this is just a trade dispute, and how much is this a symptom of a broader breakdown?
Well, I think there certainly are trade issues which need to be addressed. China entered the WTO around 2000. At that time, they were 4% of the world GDP. They are now 15. Their status of development is much more now than they used to be, although they take pains to emphasize that they are still very much a developing country. But their impact on the world and on their trading partners is completely different from what it used to be. So the dispensation which was reached, the terms on which they entered the WTO, need to be brought up to date, and issues which have come up which need to be tackled. So I think there are real trade issues. But it goes beyond trade. It goes beyond trade because if the trade issues are not well tackled, you lead to broader conflicts over investments, over currency, over many other things which will stoke mutual suspicions and distrust, and that can lead to a lot of trouble.
And where do you see the core of that distrust? Is it?
Well, the most apocalyptic view is that the Chinese will think, some Chinese will think, that the Americans want to frustrate their emergence in the world to their rightful place, and some Americans will think the Chinese want to supplant America's role as the hyperpower. I mean, there are shades of gray, but I'm putting it at the extreme.
And how much does that fit, maybe first with America? You lived in Kansas, famously?
Yes, I've spent a year in Kansas, Wizard of Oz country.
But is
it's quite a remarkable experience. First, you meet people who are warm and the salt of the earth and what America is mostly made of. But secondly, you realize how far away the rest of the world is, including the two east and west coasts.
Yes, and China much further.
China much further. In those days, the Soviet Union equally far away, and yet not irrelevant because the farmers sell to them.
And do you think that America that you know, do you think that America is determined to stop China becoming the world's biggest economy?
I don't think that it has reached that point. I don't necessarily think that for the mass of Americans, China is a top item on their agenda or in their mind share. But I think that if the issues are not well handled, you could lead to very strong stereotypes being formed of one another, which will have policy consequences.
There are a lot of people here from America who may have a sort of, I suppose, a sense of trepidation about China. And it strikes me that Singapore has always played an outsized role in China's development. I remember coming here in 2010 to see you and your father, and then the meetings being delayed suddenly by a couple of days because a then, to me, unknown man called Xi Jinping had just been joined the military commission, which made him the heir apparent in China. And one of the first things he wanted to do was to come here and see you and your father. So you have played this role in China's development. Which way do you see China going?
I think you overstate our role. They see us as a bonsai tree model of what China is.
People can take a bonsai tree a long way.
Well, so it's intriguing to look at and to scrutinize, but then you ask yourself, but we are so many hundreds of times bigger, what of this is relevant? And hopefully some ineffable essence of it is useful to them, and they take it back and transmute it, and it may take root in China.
But at that time, people saw China people talked about Singapore as a sort of model, that's something that was more democratic, but also had took an Asian view of the way the world would go.
I don't think they see us as the way China will evolve. What they are intrigued in is how is it possible in Singapore to have free and open elections regularly, multi-party politics, and one party remain in power for such a long time.
It's strange, that.
And it is strange, and it is not a given outcome for Singapore either.
But just pushing you a bit on China, which way do you, if you look forward to China, say 10 years from now, what kind of China do you see then?
I think the economy will have developed considerably more. Their engagements in the region will be even more significant than now. Already they are the biggest trading partner for nearly all the countries in Asia, from Japan to Korea to the ASEAN countries to Australia, New Zealand. All the countries, including all the American allies. So they are a big fact in the world for us. And all of us would like to see China prospering and us prospering with it. And we hope that will be the case 10 years from now. The Chinese will emphasize to you that they face many domestic issues, not least of which is income inequality between the rich and the poor people and the rich and the poor regions. And they have to make some considerably difficult reforms, economic and social, and even political updating, in order to keep on course so that we can continue to see an exponential trajectory.
And you talked about that domestic priority, but you are also I think you just become chair of ASEAN.
We have been chair this year, yes.
But you look at all the countries of Southeast Asia, they face to some degree, I was talking to somebody earlier, they face some degree of choice about which side they might be seen on, or are they all trying to stay in the middle?
No, it depends. The countries have different strategic perspectives. If you are in Indochina, for example, I think China will loom very large, but the responses will be different. Vietnam is trying to maintain an independent position. The Cambodians or the Laotians will see China as a very big source of aid, support, cooperation. The Thais will be very careful to make friends with all the powers that be, and China will be one of the important ones. If you look at countries which have issues with China, for example, over the South China Sea, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, it's more complicated, but neither do they wish to collide because they know that it's a broad account and there are other things to take into consideration. If you look at Singapore, we have no stake in the disputes in the South China Sea, but we do have an interest both in China's prosperity and stability, as well as in the region's openness and security. And that depends on both China and the United States.
Do you worry at all about the rivalries, the bigger rivalries, spreading into smaller ones? I look at Southeast Asia, and you have some disputes with Malaysia, you have some with Indonesia, there's a nasty election going on.
Neighbors are never without complexities. Even America and Canada have interesting conversations from time to time. So it is not surprising. We have been born to be here. This is what God gave us. And they gave us this, they gave us our people, they gave us our neighbors. We don't choose our neighbors. We are blessed with two bigger than us, and we get on well with them.
But all the
generally.
same, generally.
There will always be issues which will come up, and we have to deal with them, and in a way which is constructive, win-win, and respects the core interests of both countries.
But the fact you've just had one election in Malaysia, and we've now got this one coming up in Indonesia,
yes.
Is that a big factor in the way you see this particular region?
Well, elections happen every 5 years, so each time we look at the outcome. In Malaysia, the outcome was a surprise for many Malaysians, and I think many Singaporeans didn't expect it too, but we will work with Dr. Mahathir and his administration. We've worked with him before when he was Prime Minister. In Indonesia, we have had a good relationship with a series of Indonesian presidents, Megawati, SBY, Mr. Yudhoyono, now Mr. Jokowi. And if he's re-elected, we will continue. If somebody else is elected, well, we will develop a relationship with him.
Does it strike you, though, that many people might have thought that at a time when you have this sort of superpower tensions, you might expect those slightly smaller countries to begin to kind of form closer alliances, whilst to some degree you seem to be bickering slightly more?
No, there's some of that. There's some of that. It would be less than candid if I said that ASEAN is impervious to gravitational and tidal forces, and different countries in ASEAN feel them differently. And therefore, in our discussions, you have to make allowances for that and understand that we start off with different perspectives on the world, and therefore the area where we can develop a consensus ASEAN view is not the whole universe, but some subset thereof, which we try to make as big as possible.
You have the big meeting here next week.
Even the EU has these arguments amongst themselves, dealing with China, dealing with America, and you have to accommodate these different views.
One last thing on that. You have both China and America, neither Trump nor Mr. Xi are coming to the ASEAN meeting.
President Xi doesn't usually come to the ASEAN meetings. The premier always comes. It used to be Wen Jiabao, and now it's Li Keqiang, and Li Keqiang will be coming. He's making an official visit here. President Trump is unable to come this year. He's sending Vice President Pence. We look forward to receiving him.
Another big theme in this particular conference has been the issue of governance. And as I said earlier, people, rightly or wrongly, look to Singapore as a place which is good at government. It's good at cities, it's good at many things, and you have managed to do it with a state which is a tiny proportion of most Western states, and yet you deliver healthcare and education, which normally comes at the top of the league tables. Do you still think that sort of Asian model, that Singaporean model, can offer some examples, even if it's a bonsai tree?
Well, we hope people find us interesting. The solutions we have, other countries may or may not prefer to apply. For example, in our healthcare system, one of our cardinal principles is that people take personal responsibility for their health, and the government pays a large part of it in various subsidies, but we do expect some co-payment from everybody unless you're very poor. And that's not a principle accepted everywhere. The National Health in Britain explicitly refuses to do that.
But do you think that's a principle which in general will spread as particularly other emerging countries begin to build their healthcare?
I think it's path dependent. We were able to get here because we built up our system progressively from the time when we were not so well off. And as we became well off and as incomes rose, we were able to put aside substantial proportion of that increase in income every year. And it was 7, 8, 10, sometimes 15% of income, of wage increases, into a compulsory savings fund, the Central Provident Fund. And therefore, we have this institution which people have accepted. And you can use that fund for healthcare, for housing. We use it also for tertiary education for your children. And we are happy with that. If you haven't built that up during a long period of development, and overnight you say, I'm now going to hypothecate 1/3 of your income and put it into a compulsory savings fund for your old age so that you will not retire poor, I think a lot of people will get angry with you straight away.
What about education? If you look at education, the thing which strikes me about Singapore's example is how relatively easy, or not how unstructural it is. You tend to just fire bad teachers and promote
No, we
good
don't
ones.
just fire bad teachers. We counsel them, we train them, we improve them, and finally, if it can't be helped, we'll encourage them to find something which suits them better.
Yes. But that is an unusual... That is still an unusual thing, certainly.
No,
in the
I think
United
you have
States.
to hold people responsible. Otherwise, how do you know they're working or not working? We didn't start off like this. We began with a system where you joined as a teacher, and then you were on a scale. And every year, your wages would go up a certain proportion. And then at certain points in your career, some inspector of education will come and sit in on your class and say, well, you can cross the bar. And then you'll keep on being elevated gradually until you retire. And it worked like that for a long time, and I think there were a lot of good teachers under that system, but it wasn't really a fair system or one which got the best out of them. So eventually we were able to reach the point where we had proper promotions, we had proper career advancements, and we were able to develop the teachers, not just pay them and sack them, but develop the teachers so that you can become a master teacher, you spend your lifetime in a classroom, you have a passion for it. You can become an educational leader, you can become a head of department or a principal of a school or principal of a cluster of schools. Or you can be a specialist and you develop curriculums and you write textbooks and you follow your passion and we will invest in you and you can do a master's, a PhD. And we want people who are passionate to do this.
But doesn't it surprise you? Every single government I've spoken to around the world sends people to Singapore to come and look at this, and then they don't copy it.
Well, you've got to persuade your teachers' union to agree.
Yes,
And you've also got to persuade the public to accept a system where the government takes a very leading role. And in many countries, it's diversified. In America, the counties look after the education system. So you may or may not have the resources to do this.
Some people, when they look at Singapore, they give it all this credit on government, but they do point out that you have got an aging population, and you've now got at least a little bit of an immigration problem. Is that?
We have an aging population. Our median age is now 41 and growing. And if you look at the proportion of people who are 65 and above, we are now maybe 1 in 7. By 2030, we may be 1 in 3, something like that. So on the one hand, we are growing older. On the other hand, people are healthier and are able to work longer. So I don't think living shorter is a good solution.
The other part of that is to have a relatively tough government that is prepared to tell people to work longer.
No, we can't tell people to work longer. I think people naturally wish to be able to work longer, provided the incentives are there and the encouragement is provided, and you make it feasible. One of the things we do, and one of the ways we have intervened is we have a subvention to employers for the older workers to encourage them to keep them on the payroll. And the subvention goes to help to pay for their compulsory CPF savings. And therefore, it lessens the burden on the employers. It gives the workers an incentive to keep on working. And I think they're happy to keep on working because they keep active, they're doing something useful, and it keeps them mentally alert.
And immigration?
Immigration is a vexed subject in every country. It's partly economics. People feel worried about whether their jobs will be will be supplanted, or maybe at least their incomes will be affected. But it's more than that. There's also a sense of identity and what sort of society you're in, and whether these are familiar faces, familiar sounds, familiar customs or not. And it's very difficult to not have those issues arise. We have a large foreign worker population here. They are 1/3 of our workforce, which means for every 2 Singaporean workers, there's 1 foreign worker in Singapore. He could be running a bank, he could be a construction worker, he could be a cleaner on the streets. But that's not a small number. But most of those are transient. They come, they work when they finish whatever the economic activity here. One day they expect to go home. We do have immigration in the sense of people coming in and staying, and the numbers are not small. Every year we have about 35,000 resident babies born in Singapore. Every year we accept about 30,000 permanent residents. That means people given effectively a green card. So it's almost 1 in 2.
Do you think any country, I'm intrigued given the amount you study other governments, is there any country you think that does immigration well? If you listen to all the debates today, you would have heard the words immigration come up repeatedly.
I think different countries have made different trade-offs. Some have been very open and have benefited considerably from it. America is one of them. It's now become a hot political issue, but nevertheless, that you are able to attract talent from all over the world to Silicon Valley, to your universities, to your businesses, MNCs, to have an environment where people can come in and live and work in America and make America vibrant. That's a tremendous plus which you have, which America has, which China doesn't have, Japan doesn't have. Even the Europeans don't have to the same degree. If you look at Japan, they've made a different accommodation. It's a much more closed society. The immigrants who come in, they try and get them to learn Japanese before you let them work. They do that to nurses, for example. So it's a more cohesive, tightly knit society, but on the other hand, much less conscious of the outside world and how things look outside of your own closed environment. So that's the trade-off. And now they're having to shift that trade-off because the numbers are telling on them and their population is falling. We are trying to tread a very careful balance to have enough of the next generation being our own kids born to us, but some significant contribution also from people who come in and who can cast their lot with us and become Singaporeans.
So you deliberately make the choice that the native-born side of the equation must be satisfied to some extent.
It's not that you want to be satisfied. I think we are trying very hard to have enough native-born in the next generation. And that is very hard, because to do that, on average, every woman needs 2.1 kids. One for herself, one for her husband, and 0.1 just for contingencies. But we don't have that. We have less than 1.2. Those who are getting married, they're producing 2 kids. But 1/3 aren't getting married, and very few people have babies outside wedlock in Singapore, just as well. And so on average, my statistics don't add up.
Exactly. Well, I'm sure you can make it change. I asked you a degree.
No, I'm not sure I can make it change. I've tried very hard.
You could tell Singaporeans to go out and create babies tonight.
We have tried that too.
I've asked you about the Singaporean model, partly for a parochial reason, that there is a small, very old European country with which you're somewhat familiar, that some people there hope will become Singapore on the Thames after Brexit.
I don't think you will have...
Do you have any views on that?
No, I don't think you'll have London by the Merlion. Yes. It's not possible. I think we are very different.
You should explain that the Merlion is the
symbol,
Merlion
is just down the coast from here, at the mouth of the Singapore River. It's an icon of Singapore. And travelers come here, and this is one of the things you see, it's what Singapore is. I don't think Singapore can become like London, or London can become like Singapore. The histories are completely different. We are small. We are in the middle of a very open and very, how shall I put it, an environment which is much less predictable even than Britain's environment in Europe. Britain has developed a system of state welfare, of government role in the system where the government accounts for 40–45% of the GDP. The Singapore government accounts for 16% of the GDP, maybe 17%. So to say that you're going to become like Singapore, are you going to give up 2/3 of your government spending and state pensions and national health? We trade with the EU. They are a significant partner to us, highly valued, maybe about 20% of our trade. Britain has the EU with 70% of your trade. So unless you tow that sceptred isle over here.
That sounds a very polite way of saying that Singapore on the Thames is a pipe dream that will never happen.
You will have to find a different way to prosper, having made the decision to leave the EU. But I don't think, and maybe if you look at Singapore, you might think there's some ideas you can use, and we hope so. But I don't think you can take one society's solution and just plonk it on a different society.
Would you do a trade deal with the new independent Britain?
Yes, we would. In the first instance, we will do what the jargon now calls a short-form deal, which means whatever we have with the EU, we will port over, and we will continue to let it apply with Britain for some time, because basically not much will have changed in Britain's circumstances domestically, until such time as we can work out a more substantive agreement with Britain, which in due course we hope we will.
Can I ask you a bit about your own future and what happens? You've had a very good year. You've had the Kim-Trump summit. You've had this conference. You've been the star of Crazy Rich Asians. There's a whole variety of things that has been good for Singapore.
I don't think they give us delusions of grandeur. The Kim-Trump summit, they were looking for a venue which both sides could trust and rely upon to deliver.
Don't knock that idea. It worked with us as well.
Well, and they came. So we're happy that we hosted the summit. We hope it makes some contribution to peace and reconciliation in the Korean Peninsula. Results really yet to be seen. Crazy rich Asians have nothing to do with us. We don't live like that. And I think it would be disastrous if Singaporeans get the idea that that is the way we ought to live.
But all the same, you are having a good year. Next year is Raffles, the 200th anniversary of Stanford Raffles coming here.
Yes.
Why not? Would that be a reason to bring the election forward? You have the possibility of an election in 2021.
It's always possible. There are many reasons to bring elections forward or not. So we'll see.
You're learning the art. Can I ask you, one last thing on yourself. You've talked about not going on beyond 70. You're 60 yourself.
I'm 66.
66, I'm sorry. And but you've been in politics, your father's in politics. Are any of the next generation of Lees thinking about it? And would you recommend politics in the modern age to anybody?
Well, none of them have shown any interest in coming into politics, of my sons or daughter. I mean, they're entitled to, but I don't think it is likely that they will feel the same compulsion which I did, that it was something which you had a duty to do. I mean, they have their own responsibilities and careers, and I'm sure they will be good Singaporean citizens and make contributions in their own ways. But I think it would be unkind for me to add more burden on them. It's difficult enough for them carrying my name.
But do you think the job of even running a country as orderly as Singapore has got much more difficult over the 14 years that you have done it?
I think it becomes more complicated. Certainly the social media makes things very different. And it's not just that you have more news going around, but you have more fake news, and you have opinions which can overnight crystallize, and it may or may not be based on fact. And suddenly you are having to react to them. It's ridiculous. I mean, one night you go to sleep, all is well. Next morning somebody is overreacted to a rumor. Hundreds of thousands of people have become agitated. And then you've got to chase your tail to put it away. And it's a completely different kind of environment. And we were thinking about a long-term plan, and to stay on course, you have to be able to deal with all these buffetings which will beset you ceaselessly.
But does that make long-term strategic thinking much, much harder for politicians of any sort?
I think it will certainly leave you less time to think what your long-term intentions will be. It also makes it harder for you to get people to focus on the long term and to believe that, in fact, you have a workable scheme to get from here to there. Because every day you are chasing a new rabbit.